Hello, we're going to go through the texture painting mode in cycles. So this mode here, and we'll change it to cycles, and we're going to be modeling a club, and we're going to be painting that. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a club. I'm going to fast forward that so you can rush through that bit, because it's not a modeling tutorial, it's a texture painting tutorial. Okay. So I've taken my club, or a simple cube, and turned it into a club by scaling along the x-axis and turning it into this shape, then subdividing it and pulling the subdivisions down. And of course Control R to add an edge loop, and then you just select the edge loop by holding Alt and right clicking one of the edges along that loop that you want. Okay, so I've finished my club, the modeling side, and the next thing to do will be to unwrap it so that we can texture it. So if we go into the face select mode, let's just deselect everything, you can see that I've marked my seams around here, around there, and around there. So that's simply selecting an edge loop by Alt right click. Now let's get to edge mode. Alt right click, and that's got all that edge there. And then I could chop it right in half like that. That's not such a bad idea. But I'm going to use the C selection tool. So press C, and then middle mouse button will take out the unwanted edges. So C and middle mouse button removes. The left mouse button selects, middle mouse button removes, and then when you're happy with the selection that you've got, you press the right mouse button. Okay, that's the circle select tool, a really useful tool. So I've got that selected, then I would go up to Shadings in UVs, Mark Seam, and I'll click that, but it doesn't make a difference because there's already a seam there. Okay, so I'm happy with that, and then I press, I get my faces, select them all, and press U for unwrap. Now if I didn't mark the seams, I could just go to Smart UV Project. That would do an okay job, but you could get issues. It's much better to do an actual manual unwrap, especially with an object like this. So U, unwrap, and let's see what happens in the UV editor. If I bring another one out here, get rid of those. Right, let's change this to the node editor, and this one to the UV editor. Let's get those. Okay, and you can see my shape there. So it's cut up. There's some sort of issue. I must have done something wrong with the modelling, because it's cut it into two extra bits there. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm not going to worry too much about that. I've got cycles on, and I've given this just a general diffuse shader. And what we want to do, we want to be able to paint onto that colour area here. So let's do that. Right, we're in object mode at the moment, so we change it to texture paint mode. And that brings us up with this. And I try and paint on it, nothing happens because I have to do what's called add a paint slot. So remember how if I was adding a wood image to this, I could go in here, add texture, and then use an image texture. Well, I want to create an image texture, and to do that I have to say add paint slot. And I want to do a color. When you're in Blender Render, you can add all these sort of different textures, but in Cycles it's a little bit more tricky. But you can still do it, but I just go for one diffuse color, and then you can change that around. It's always good if you're doing some gaming. The default is 1024, but which is a low resolution texture. I think it's a good idea to double that, especially for the sake of this tutorial. And then it's a higher resolution, well, double that resolution. Give us a little bit more to play with. But not too much, so it would still be relatively okay for a low poly model and gaming. Okay, so press OK, and that makes this appear here, which is actually the material. So if we join this up, then it's going to work and we can paint on it. It's not coming up here though. Okay, and it's got a little star next to image, and it's saying you haven't saved this image. Okay, So we need to save image, and for some reason, no idea why, it doesn't let you save the image, so you have to go save image as, and then put it in here somewhere. I'm just putting it on my desktop. So save the image, and then that means that this image, this texture, I'm assuming isn't going to work. Let's just pull it out, say where it is. Yep, so that's not the right texture, so we have to quickly go into here. On this down arrow, it should be there. That's the one there, that's working, and that says 01, so I'm just going to make sure that is material diffuse color. Okay, I think that's going to work. Let's hope this works. Right, when I paint on here, yes, it is appearing on there. Okay, a little bit confused there, but all you have to make sure is that image texture is the one you are painting on, so the label here is the same as the label here, and that will all work. Okay, so every time I paint on here, then I will need to save the image. So you click on here, save image, and then when I render, it's going to say, right, this image texture that is saved on my desktop is going into the color node. So that will all work. Okay, a little bit confusing there, but it does work. Okay, so what I'm going to show you first is just how to simply paint onto this texture. So you can see I'm painting on with just a simple color. Let's put the strength up to 1 so it paints on a uniform color. Let's make it a little bit darker actually. So it's a darkish brown. It's not particularly browny colour actually. Let's try and get it a bit more brown there. So I'm obviously going onto the colour wheel, choosing the colour, putting the strength up to 1. So that's the strength of my brush. If I turn it down, you can see it sort of see-through. Up to 1, and it's solid. Okay, so colour it on all brown. Lovely. To be honest, this isn't the normal way of texture, and I'll show you why in the next tutorial, but it's a good introduction, so it's certainly a good start, and some people do it like this because they're very good artists. Okay, so I've got a nice brown texture there. Right, so I want to zoom in and paint some sort of grooves on my woody club. Okay, so let's make it a little bit darker, about there. And then to change the brush size, you press F and then move in and out. So I'm going to change it to a bit smaller. Probably just take it at the edge up a little bit there. Make it a bit smaller. And now I can pull these away. I don't need them for now. Alright, and let's to a sort of grain of wood. That looks way too hard. Let's undo that. Bit brighter. Okay, so quite simply here, I'm just filling in the dark spots with a black brush. Sort of making grooves, following the sort of grain of the wood. And then I make the brush a little bit darker, and then fill in finer bits, so make the brush smaller and darker. Went a little bit lighter now, filled in some light patches with a slightly bigger brush. Then I brought the brush down quite small to make some little highlights. I'm only going to do one side, just so you get the idea of what's going on. Filling in a tiny bit of shading, and it looks a little bit blurry really, and needs a bit of smartening up, but you get the idea. Then I moved on to the handle in a similar way. Had a problem with my seam slightly there, but not important for this tutorial. And just filling in dark patches, light patches, adding a few little highlights. So again, making the brush small, big, light, dark. And it generally looks alright. Okay, so there we go. A really basic, simple club. Not brilliantly painted, but remember to make sure you're saving your images regularly. So save image. So now when I render this, we can see my artwork. Not amazing, but you get the idea. What we could do, I suppose, is add that to the displacement. Give it a bump map and see what that looks like. Let's go to rendered view for this one. Yeah, it's starting to work, roughly. Hopefully you can see the idea now behind texture painting. In the next tutorial I'll go through actually using textures for your brushes, which gives you a more realistic look if that's what you're going for. Thanks for watching.